The string quartet stopped mid-measure. My father, William, tapped his champagne glass, silencing the 100 guests gathered in the manicured gardens of the estate. I expected a toast. Maybe even a reluctant acknowledgement of my recent promotion. Instead he handed me a heavy leather-bound portfolio. It wasn't a gift. I opened it to find a single itemized document, an invoice. $248,000. Room, board, and inconvenience, he announced, his voice projecting to the back row. You've been a bad investment, Scarlett. Consider this us cutting our losses. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was suffocating. Before we dive deeper, drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from right now. I want to see how far this story reaches. My mother, Christine, didn't gasp. She didn't rush forward to snatch the invoice from my father's hands or apologize to the guests for the cruel theater. She simply smoothed the front of her silk dress, took the microphone from William and handed it to my sister, Brooklyn. That transfer of power told me everything I needed to know. Brooklyn stepped forward, creating a visual dissonance that was impossible to miss. She was wearing a strapless designer gown that shimmered under the garden lights, something that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. Her hair was professionally styled, her skin glowing from a recent spa day. I, on the other hand, was still in my work blazer and slacks, having come straight from the server room to make it here on time. The contrast wasn't accidental. It was a statement. She was the investment. I was the expense. The keys, Scarlett, Brooklyn said, her voice amplified by the speakers. She didn't whisper it. She performed it. She held out a manicured hand, palm up, waiting. Dad transferred the title to the winner of the family this morning. You know, someone who actually appreciates the brand. I looked at her hand. Then I looked at the car key in my own. It wasn't a luxury vehicle. It was a 5-year-old sedan I used to commute to the city, to get to the job that paid for my own rent and utilities. But technically, William's name was still on the title from when I was 21. I hadn't thought to change it because I thought we were family. I thought ownership was a formality, not a weapon. I placed the key in her palm. The metal felt cold, but Brooklyn's smile was colder. She closed her fingers around it like she was crushing a bug. Finally, she breathed into the mic, a sound that was half laugh, half sigh. Someone had to take out the trash. But they weren't done. The dismantling of my personal life was just the opening act. William gestured toward the back of the crowd, summoning someone forward. My stomach turned over as I saw James, my department head, step into the circle of light. James was a weak man, the kind of middle manager who survived by agreeing with whoever had the most money in the room. He looked at his shoes, then at William, then finally at me. He looked terrified, but he also looked obedient. James, William said, his voice booming with false conviviality. Why don't you share the news? We believe in transparency here. James cleared his throat. He didn't take the microphone. He didn't need to. The silence in the garden was absolute. Scarlett, he said, his voice cracking. Based on the character references provided by your parents this week, and the financial liabilities they've highlighted, the company feels you're a security risk. He paused, swallowing hard. You're terminated effective Monday. Please don't come to the office. We'll mail your personal effects. The air left my lungs. This wasn't just a bad birthday. This wasn't a family spat. This was a calculated, strategic demolition of my existence. They hadn't just decided to stop loving me. They had decided to erase me. They wanted me unemployed, immobile, and indebted. They wanted me to have nothing so that I would have to crawl back to them for everything. I looked around the garden. The guests were statues in expensive suits. No one moved. No one spoke up. They were witnessing a social execution, and they were too polite or perhaps too fascinated to intervene. I stood alone on the manicured grass, the invoice heavy in my bag, the space where my car key used to be burning in my pocket. I looked at William, who was beaming. I looked at Christine, who was examining her nails. I looked at Brooklyn, who was dangling my key ring on her finger. And in that moment the shock fractured. It didn't break into sadness. It broke into something much harder, much sharper. It broke into clarity. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't give them the satisfaction of a scene. Emotion is just bad data in an audit. I deleted it. I looked at William straight in his eyes, then placed the leather portfolio into my tote bag. I turned around and walked out of the garden without uttering a single syllable. The gravel crunched under my sensible shoes, the only sound in the suffocating silence. The walk home was 3 miles. It gave me time to think. It gave me time to feel the blisters forming on my heels and the cold reality settling in my chest. By the time I unlocked the door to my apartment, the sun had set, and the air inside smelled like stale coffee and shock. I didn't turn on the lights. I didn't need to see the empty space to know how alone I was. I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop. I didn't go to a job board. I didn't update my resume. I opened a terminal window. The black screen and the blinking green cursor were the only things that felt honest. I am a cybersecurity analyst. My job is to find vulnerabilities, to trace breaches, to understand how systems fail. And my family was a failing system. As I typed in the command lines, initializing the search protocols I usually reserved for corporate audits, I let myself think about the invoice. $248,000. It was a staggering number, precise and cruel. But as I stared at the blinking cursor, I realized something. It wasn't just a bill. It was a confession. See, healthy love isn't a ledger. You don't track the cost of diapers or the price of school lunches unless you view your child as an asset that isn't performing. This is the transactional love trap. Narcissistic parents don't raise children. They make investments. And when the investment doesn't yield the return they want, when the child doesn't marry rich or become famous, or reflect their own glory back at them, they liquidate. They cut their losses. The invoice wasn't about money. It was about ownership. They were telling me that my existence had a price tag, and since I wasn't paying dividends and social status, I was in debt. They wanted to foreclose on my life. I thought about the times I had paid the utility bills at the manor so the power wouldn't be cut before a party, quietly transferring funds from my savings while Brooklyn got a new nose job because confidence is key. I thought about the years I spent fixing their network, securing their accounts, cleaning up their digital messes, never asking for a cent. I realized then that they didn't hate me because I was a failure. They hated me because I was competent. They hated me because I didn't need them, and for people like William and Christine, independence is the ultimate insult. The code on my screen stopped scrolling. The search was complete. I took a deep breath and opened the first file. It was a bank statement. But it wasn't mine. It was theirs. And the numbers didn't add up. The silence in my apartment was heavy, but my phone was screaming. It vibrated against the desk surface like a trapped insect, buzzing with the fallout of their little garden party performance. I didn't pick it up. I just watched the notifications scroll down the lock screen, cataloging the data. First came the gaslighting. A text from Christine. "We just wanted you to see reality, Scarlett. Sometimes love looks like a hard lesson. Call us when you're ready to grow up." Then came the performance art. A notification from Instagram. Brooklyn had posted a photo. It was a selfie in the driver's seat of my sedan, her new car. She was pouting, the lighting perfectly adjusted to catch the glint of a tear that I knew she'd summoned on command. The caption read, "So sad when family turns toxic. Sometimes you have to cut people off to protect your peace. #healing, #boundaries. Finally, the threat. An email from William. Subject line, repayment schedule. The body of the email was brief. "If you do not set up a payment plan for the $248,000 by Friday, we will pursue legal action for theft of services. Do not test me." They expected me to be reading these through a veil of tears. They expected me to be typing out frantic, apologetic paragraphs, begging for forgiveness, promising to pay whatever they asked just to be let back into the fold. They were betting on the version of me they had constructed in their heads, the weak, dependent daughter who needed their validation to breathe. But they had forgotten what I actually do for a living. I don't deal in drama. I deal in threat assessment and mitigation. I swiped the notifications away, archiving them into a secure folder. I didn't block them. You never block a source of intelligence. You just mute the noise. I turned back to my laptop. The forensic search on their finances was running in the background, a progress bar inching toward completion. While that cooked, I had another fire to put out. My career. James, my former boss, was a weak link in the corporate chain. He had fired me based on hearsay to impress a man in a tuxedo. It was a tactical error. I didn't call James. You don't negotiate with a compromised node. You bypass it. I opened my secure contact list and found the direct line for the regional director. Last year, when a ransomware attack had threatened to encrypt the entire West Coast database, I was the one who found the breach. I was the one who stayed up for 72 hours straight to patch the vulnerability while James was coordinating from a golf course. She knew my name. She knew my value. I dialed. She picked up on the second ring. "Scarlett." Her voice was sharp, surprised. "It's late. Is the server down?" "The network is secure," I said, keeping my voice flat and professional. "But my employment status isn't. I needed to inform you that as of 2 hours ago, I was terminated by James." "Terminated? On what grounds?" "He attended a private party hosted by my parents. Based on a personal dispute regarding family finances, he decided I was a security risk. There was no HR presence. No performance review. No exit interview. Just a public dismissal in front of 100 socialites. There was a silence on the line. It was the silence of a woman who understands liability. He fired a lead analyst at a cocktail party based on personal gossip? Yes. I'm calling to clarify if this is the new company protocol for personnel management. Because if it is, I need to know where to send my badge. "Give me 5 minutes," she said. The line went dead. I didn't stare at the phone. I went to the kitchen and made a pot of coffee. I poured a cup black and returned to the desk. 4 minutes and 30 seconds later, my personal email pinged. It was an automated notification from the corporate system. Access restored. Then a second email, this time from the regional director. James has been placed on immediate administrative leave pending a formal investigation into professional misconduct. Your termination is voided. You are reinstated effective immediately, with a 10% retention adjustment to your salary for the clerical error. Take Monday off. We'll talk Tuesday. I took a sip of the coffee. It was bitter, but it tasted like victory. The first pillar of their control had just crumbled. They thought they had stripped me of my livelihood, leaving me destitute and desperate. Instead, they had just handed me a raise and removed the only incompetent manager standing in my way. I looked back at the terminal window. The progress bar hit 100%. The data from my parents' financial history was ready. I cracked my knuckles and leaned in. If they thought losing my job was going to break me, they had no idea what was about to happen when I looked inside their bank accounts. The spreadsheet on my screen was a map of moral decay. I wasn't looking at a family's budget. I was looking at a crime scene. I started with the car. The sedan Brooklyn had so gleefully reclaimed in the garden. William had claimed he transferred the title because he owned it. He lied. I traced the VIN number through the DMV database and cross-referenced it with the bank records I just decrypted. The initial purchase didn't come from William's personal account. It came from an account ending in 4092. I queried the account origin. It was a trust. The Eleanor Trust. My grandmother. She had died 10 years ago and I was told she left nothing but old jewelry. But here it was. A trust fund established in my name, meant to mature when I turned 21. The balance should have been substantial. It was zero. William hadn't bought that car for me out of the goodness of his heart. He had bought it with my money, put his name on the title and then loaned it to me to keep me grateful. And now he had given my stolen property to Brooklyn as a reward for her loyalty. But that was just petty theft. The real anomaly was in the investment folder. My parents had always postured as savvy investors, managing portfolios for family members who weren't financially literate. I pulled up the records for Uncle Kevin and Aunt Michelle. They were good people, trusting people. They had been transferring $5,000 a month to William for a high-yield tech fund for 5 years. I followed the money trail. The transfers hit William's holding account, sat there for 24 hours and then were wired out. Not to a tech fund. Not to a stock market exchange. They were wired to an account labeled BS Lifestyle LLC. Brooklyn Scarlett. I clicked on the LLC details. It was a shell company used to pay off credit cards, lease luxury vehicles and fund influencer trips to Tulum and Paris. Uncle Kevin wasn't investing in the future. He was funding Brooklyn's wardrobe. I sat back, the glow of the monitor illuminating the dark apartment. This changed everything. This wasn't just bad parenting, it was a felony. But the most damning piece of evidence wasn't the money itself. It was the signatures. On every withdrawal slip from the shell company, right next to William's jagged scrawl, was a loopier, practiced signature. Brooklyn. This brings us to the enabler's debt. See, the golden child often pleads ignorance. They claim they are just the passive recipients of the parents' generosity. They say, I didn't know where the money came from, I just spent it. It's a convenient lie. But willful ignorance is not innocence, it's a strategy. Brooklyn wasn't just a bystander. The digital logs proved she was an accomplice, authorizing the theft of our aunt and uncle's money to fund her lifestyle. I backed up the files to an encrypted drive. The invoice they handed me was theater, but this data was a subpoena. I attached a single PDF named Family Under Fledgling to an email addressed to my parents, Brooklyn, and the victims, Uncle Kevin and Aunt Michelle. No message was needed. I hit send, then immediately disconnected my phone and router. Silence terrifies narcissists. By refusing to engage, I starved them of the reaction they craved. I slept soundly while they panicked. When I reconnected the next morning, my phone flooded with threats, but one voicemail stood out. It was Uncle Kevin. Instead of anger, he sounded relieved. You didn't destroy the family, Scarlett, he said. You just turned on the lights. I'm calling my lawyer. Days later, my father pounded on my door. He looked broken, begging me to retract the email to save him from prison. We did it for the family legacy, he pleaded. You didn't give me a legacy, I replied through the chain lock. You gave me an invoice. I slid a piece of paper through the crack. The federal sentencing guidelines for wire fraud. You wanted to teach me the cost of living, I said. This is the cost of lying. I shut the door and locked the deadbolt. The collapse was swift. The estate was seized to pay restitution. Brooklyn lost her sponsors and followers, forcing her into a retail job. 2 weeks later, I sat at my desk. The war was over. I right-clicked the family_audit folder containing all the evidence and hit delete. For 26 years, I carried a debt that wasn't mine. Now the account was closed. I looked out the window, finally free. Zero debt. Zero guilt. Zero regrets.